For months, Drew Kane's murder has hung over Port Charles like a storm cloud that refuses to break, a crime whispered about in backrooms and boardrooms but never truly confronted. Now, a new thread is starting to emerge from the tangle of unanswered questions, and it leads straight back to a man most viewers probably thought was long gone from the canvas, Brad Cooper. The idea that this insecure, often hapless schemer might be the hidden hand behind Drew's death sounds absurd at first glance. Yet the more we examine Selina Wu's shadowy empire and Curtis Ashford's increasingly desperate choices, the more unnerving it becomes to imagine Brad as the reluctant weapon forged in Selina's world, and the more it makes sense that the truth has never quite lined up with what we were told. Brad's connection to Selina was never just a family tie, it was an unspoken contract. When she first began pulling him into her orbit, it wasn't out of sentimentality or nostalgia. Selina Wu does not waste time on lost causes. She saw something in Brad, a blend of intelligence, emotional vulnerability, and moral flexibility, that made him uniquely useful. He was not a hardened killer, but that was exactly what made him so valuable. Brad could pass unnoticed in hospital corridors, charity events, family gatherings. He knew how to fade into the background, how to make himself small, how to obey when he felt cornered. For someone like Selina, whose business thrives on secrets and deniability, a man like Brad is raw material waiting to be sculpted into a weapon. Perhaps that transformation happened off-screen, when Brad disappeared from Port Charles and the cameras shifted focus to other dramas. It's easy to imagine Selina spiriting him away under the guise of family protection, only to rebuild him piece by piece. Training wouldn't need to look like a traditional mob indoctrination. For Brad, the worst pressure would be emotional. Selina could remind him of every mistake he ever made, every bridge he burned, every time his lies hurt the people he loved. She could lay out the reality with chilling clarity. In her world, you don't walk away. You pay off your debts, with loyalty, with obedience, and if necessary, with blood. And if he refused? Selina has no shortage of ways to make refusal unthinkable. Threats against Lucas, against any tenuous shot at a normal life, against the fragile redemption Brad might still crave, she would know where to press hardest. By the time Drew Kane became a target, Brad may already have been living in a kind of emotional prison. Selina's organization does not operate on trust and warmth, it operates on leverage. If she told him there was a man whose death would ensure stability and safety for the family, Brad wouldn't hear strategy. He would hear a verdict. Do this, and you live under my protection. Refuse, and everything you still care about is fair game. That is the kind of psychological suffocation that can turn a deeply reluctant man into someone who will stand in the shadows with a gun in his trembling hands. Then comes that chilling flashback in the December 3rd episode, where Selina quietly bargains with Curtis Ashford. The scene plays like a confession wrapped inside a business negotiation. Curtis, consumed by grief, anger, and a desire to clean up a mess he feels Drew created, or at least was tied to, pushes Selina toward a final solution. He wants Drew gone. Not later. Not someday. Tonight. It is the kind of line people cross when they believe there's no going back to who they used to be. Curtis insists, and Selina listens with a calculating calm that is far more horrifying than rage. When she assures him the job will be done within 2 hours, she is not making a guess. She is confirming that the pieces of the machine are already in motion. Most unsettling of all is the way she hints that she already has the right person lined up to carry out the hit. For an organization like hers, that doesn't mean pulling in a nameless thug from the fringes. It suggests someone she trusts to follow instructions yet whose disappearance from the board, if things go wrong, wouldn't cause too much noise. Someone who owes her everything and who can't imagine a life beyond her reach. When you put those parameters together, Brad becomes a disturbingly plausible fit. He is family by blood, bound by obligation, and long absent from the everyday life of Port Charles. His return to Selina's side would barely register to most of the town, until the consequences exploded. Imagine Brad flying home under cover of night, his stomach twisted in knots, Selina's voice echoing in his ears. He might rehearse the instructions in his mind the way other people recite prayers. The meeting place. the timing, the angle of approach. And under all of that, a desperate hope that something, anything, will go wrong before he has to squeeze the trigger. Brad has never been someone who thrives in chaos. He tends to flail, to panic, to make the worst possible decision at the worst possible time. Ironically, that very tendency could be the reason Drew survived the initial attempt on his life. A professional assassin would have fired cleanly and walked away. Brad, racked with fear and remorse, might have hesitated, aimed badly, or fled before confirming the outcome, leaving Drew badly wounded but still breathing. That failure would fit Brad's tragic pattern almost too perfectly. His life is a chain of half-finished lies and disasters that spiral out of his control. If he truly was the one tasked with killing Drew, it's easy to picture him collapsing afterward in some anonymous hotel room, hands shaking, sickened by what he has done and what he almost did. The guilt alone would be enough to consume him, but in Selina's world, failure is as dangerous as defiance. If she gave him a simple task, end Drew Kane's life, and he couldn't complete it cleanly, she would not be pleased. Discipline in her organization is not a theoretical concept. Brad's survival after botching such a mission would require one of two things: either he has value in some future plan she hasn't revealed yet, or he has information she needs to control. There is another possibility, however, that is just as chilling and perhaps even more explosive. What if Brad's role in this story is not solely that of triggerman, but also unwilling witness? He might have approached Drew under cover of darkness, weapon in hand, wrestling with the decision, to kill or to flee. Only for someone else to appear and seize the moment. Another shooter, one whose loyalty to the job is far more unwavering, could have stepped out of the shadows and fired before Brad could act. In that instant, Brad would no longer be merely an instrument, he would become a liability. He would know that someone else pulled the trigger. He would know that the truth of Drew's death is more complicated than a single contract killing. And because Brad is Brad, his instinct would be to run. Picture him bolting from the scene, heart pounding, the crack of the gunshot ringing in his ears as Drew collapses. He doesn't wait to see if Drew survives. He doesn't stay to check who the other shooter was. He simply runs, because facing what just happened is unbearable. That one panicked decision could explain why the investigation has been such a murky mess. Witnesses vanish. Motives blur. The chain of responsibility fractures into rumors and half-truths. Somewhere out there, Brad carries a secret he can't confess and can't forget, a memory of being on the edge of the worst moment of his life and then watching someone else cross the line he couldn't quite step over. If the show chooses to reveal this through further flashbacks, the impact could be devastating. Viewers might finally see the scene from Brad's perspective. The shaking hands, the wavering aim, the split-second glimpse of another figure raising a gun, the muzzle flash that sears his retinas, and then the desperate scramble to escape. That kind of visual storytelling would reframe everything we think we know about Drew's murder. It would also drag Brad out of the realm of comic relief or morally gray side character and drop him into the center of a tragedy that has already reshaped Port Charles. Selina's role in all of this would become even more sinister if it's revealed that she anticipated Brad's uncertainty. Maybe she never truly expected him to be a flawless killer. Maybe she counted on his fear to keep him malleable, to ensure that whatever he saw that night would stay locked behind a wall of shame and terror. If she sent him on that mission knowing another shooter was waiting in reserve, then Brad was not the core of her plan, he was insulation. If he succeeded, her problem was solved. If he failed, his compromised presence still made him useful. He would be a man carrying a secret she could weaponize whenever she wished. And then there is Curtis Ashford, whose demand that Drew die that night casts a long, dark shadow over his own moral journey. In a world where grief and betrayal have constantly eroded the line between hero and anti-hero, Curtis's choice to pursue Selina's lethal solution could haunt him for years. If he learns that Brad, someone tangential to his own life, but deeply connected to people like Lucas, to the hospital, to the broader community, was dragged into this nightmare because of his decision, the guilt will cut even deeper. The story is no longer just about who pulled the trigger, it becomes a devastating study in shared responsibility. Curtis gave the order. Selina set the plan. Brad was forced into position. Another shooter may have sealed the deal. Drew paid the price. Everyone else is left to live with the stain. This is where Brad's return becomes more than a stunt or a nostalgia play. The fall previews have already whispered that we haven't seen the last of him, and that hint alone is loaded with potential. Brad could come back as a broken man, haunted by dreams of gunshots and blood. He could try to rebuild a life while constantly looking over his shoulder, waiting for Selina, or whoever truly masterminded Drew's murder, to demand more from him. Or he could be pushed to the brink and decide that the only way to free himself is to tell the truth, no matter who falls with him. If Brad steps back into Port Charles carrying the secret of Drew Cain's final moments, his mere presence will be a ticking time bomb. Every conversation could be loaded with subtext. Every glance at Drew's loved ones could twist the knife of his guilt a little deeper. Lucas, if he re-enters the orbit of the story, would find himself grappling once again with the question of whether Brad is simply doomed to destroy everything he touches, or whether this time, by exposing a conspiracy that stretches from Selina to Curtis and perhaps beyond, he might finally do something that matters for the right reasons. General Hospital thrives on the idea that no character is ever just one thing. Villains can be victims. Cowards can become unexpected heroes. People who vanish from the screen can return carrying secrets that collapse entire storylines in on themselves. Brad Cooper as the would-be assassin, or terrified witness, to Drew Cain's murder fits perfectly into that tradition. Whether he pulled the trigger and failed, or watched someone else do what he could not, his involvement would transform a lingering mystery into a deeply personal reckoning for nearly everyone involved. And when he finally returns to our screens, trembling under the weight of what he knows, it won't just be a homecoming. It will be the beginning of a long-delayed confession that could blow Port Charles wide open.